Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. I try to find interesting guests from all over the world that come on here and just through their story help us learn a little bit more about ourselves and things that we can do at a little more purpose. And sometimes I can't find an interesting guest, so I just have to do with what I have. I'm kidding. Today's guest is a special guest, actually, because Craig Lucas has been a friend of mine now for several years. But I didn't bring him on because he's a friend of mine. I brought him on because he has a remarkable story, and he also has a remarkable mission that he's on. He's the founder and visionary behind a company called Authentica, which I know his passion on this is really helping this activate human potential. He's focused on really creating these transformative, one-of-a-kind experiences that inspires leaders, inspires individuals to self-discover who they were really meant to be. And he does that in such a unique way by putting you in these positions of vulnerability and empathy and looking around with like-minded people and experiencing really kind of who we are at the core, our core essence, and then leaving out of there transformed and motivated and inspired to be more of who you were meant to be. And I don't want to give away too much more of what he does because we'll get into that. But he's doing this for organizations around the world. He's doing this for companies, and he's doing this for individuals, and he's doing these at events at places like the United States Naval Academy and at the Broadmoor and at these amazing venues all across the country. But I think it's just his day-to-day, what he does and how he does it and why he does it that makes Craig Lucas a special individual. And so, Craig, I'm honored to have you on. It shouldn't have taken us this long to have you on the show already. Heck, for those listening, I would say probably half the guests we've had on the show have probably been introduced to us by Craig at some point, just because of his vast impact that he's had on the world around us. So, Craig, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you on, buddy.
Jeff, it's a pleasure to be here. And based on how that intro started, I was thinking maybe I needed to give you a formal introduction, but it got better as we went. So thank you for that.
That's the story of my life. Start slow, end fast. That's what people remember. So
I love it.
Well, let's, you know the drill here on this show is the very first thing, because a lot of our listeners don't know you. And we really want to know the backstory, your origin story. So really take us back where you come from, and on that journey, why you ended up in the position you're in today. And we'll unpack that. I'll interrupt you if you go on too long of a stream of consciousness, because I have a question to ask that I think might be profound. And let's just see where this thing goes, because I want people to really know the real Craig, from all the way back on little Craig growing up in Strongsville, Ohio, to where you are today. And we're going to unpack that journey and then in your path to purpose in the process of that journey.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Jeff. And I'll give you 3 short stories or vignettes that maybe begin to give your viewers a sense of who I am. I was the kid that, loved sports. I would, kick home runs pretty regularly on the kickball field. But then when we weren't kicking, I was helping kids find fossils on the creek bed. So for me, there was really this feeling, even back then, where I was on the peripheral of everything, the center of nothing. I had a lot of different interests and just really loved to engage with a lot of different people. I didn't identify as being this person or that person or with this group and so on. Beginning in kindergarten, for a couple-year period of time, I would literally shoot enough baskets or shoot enough shots to make enough baskets to beat Wilt Chamberlain's record every day, regardless of weather. So that went on for a couple-year period of time. And it was maybe, gave me a sense of maybe what was to come as it relates to my ability to focus and my level of care and engagement for those things that had meaning. We had a family garden. I didn't grow up on a farm, Jeff, but we did have a family garden. And with the excess produce, we put it in the red wagon. I would go door to door selling vegetables. And I would have my little carbon copy thing where I'd write out the order and provide those neighbors that were kind enough to buy vegetables from me the documentation of their orders. So even at 6, 7, 8 years of age, that was happening.
And you do know our millennials and Gen Zs have no idea what carbon copy even means, right? They're like, what? What's it on? You didn't have Stripe and a swiper and an iPad? Like, what is he even talking about, carbon copy? But continue.
No, but I mean, I had a variety of different jobs. I had the paper route. I cut grass. I shoveled snow. Maybe one of my favorite stories growing up was after a real big snowstorm, I went out and had the courage to actually charge $5 for a driveway, and I happened upon this one home where you could tell they hadn't shoveled the driveway for the entirety of the season. And so I knocked on the door expecting success, and this woman opened up, and I said, as if I was the savior there, right? Would you like me to shovel your driveway? And she looked at me and said, the Lord put the snow there, the Lord will take it away, and then slammed the door in my face. So that was when I learned there was no such thing as a sure sale. But golf club repair, working at the local Reenie's grocery store as the roving deli boy, Gap store, the assistant to the assistant of a golf pro at a country club. So, you know, when I go back in time for those first 20 years, I had a variety of experiences, and I never felt like I was put out. I felt I learned a lot from each of those experiences, and I think a lot of that has made me who I am today.
So what influence did your mom, I know you speak to your mom about your mom a lot. What influence did she have on some of your attention to detail and focus and work ethic?
My mother was a sixth grade English teacher for 36 years. And to this day, I cite it as being both a blessing and a curse. I think what it did is it gave me a great appreciation for written word. I try to be very mindful of what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. And I think that also stretched into whatever verbal skills I have, and my being mindful and very intentional with how I speak and how I engage, again, with the idea of trying to convey care at every turn. So I think a lot of that comes from just my mom and how she engaged and how she cared about her students and did things above and beyond what other teachers would do. And as an example of that, her sixth grade students would have etiquette lessons. They would go to the nice restaurant locally in Strongsville, Ohio once a year, and they would learn what silverware to use, the pulling out of a chair, all those different elements at a time that I think for a lot of kids, you know, was probably quite impressionable. But I can look back in hindsight and feel like a lot of who I am today probably is attributable to how my mom was.
So you went on through high school, and you were a good athlete, good in sports, good at basketball particularly. You went on to college, and then you and I shared a common experience, different times, slightly. A couple years off. We won't say how many years off.
Probably more than a few. You've aged better than I have, Jeff.
And we discovered this when we met for the first time several years ago, that we had this in common, and it's the Walt Disney World College Program experience. Some of the listeners out there might have done that as well, and it's an internship you can do when you're in college. And I'll let Craig go into more detail. But the reason I bring it up is not only do we have this experience in common, I'm curious because I know one of the things that today makes you really unique is these, and we'll get into more detail on the event stuff in general later. But you have a really unique. You know, I tell people a lot of times that you're kind of like P.T. Barnum meets, you know, Willy Wonka. You've got this weird blend of surprise and delight in a way to create experiences that just shock and awe people, right? And I think you might have gotten a couple of those seeds planted during that college program experience. What did you learn down there on that experience? Besides, we won't get into the Snow White Village and all the stuff you can't talk about on this podcast. But what did you learn in that experience that you carried forward in that some of that the detail that you do and put into the care with which you do your events?
Yeah, well, Jeff, this story means so much to me as it relates to us because it's what allowed us to bond quite quickly after reconnecting with Dan Doherty, us having grown up on the same street together, Lincolnshire Boulevard, Strongsville, Ohio. And yeah, as it relates to Disney, I was literally walking home from working out one evening at Kent State University, walked through the Student Center, and I was looking at the bulletin boards that have all the different notices, and I saw the Disney characters there, and it caught my attention. And I saw in about 5 minutes from this point in time, there was about to be a slideshow presentation of what it would be like to work as a Walt Disney World College Program employee. And so the following day, there was an interviewing process. They had approximately 125 students from Kent State interviewing, and they selected 6. So number one, I'm very thankful for having been one of the 6. But as it relates to going down there, we lived in a trailer park called Snow White Village. 50 trailers, 8 to a trailer, so you learned in about 3 hot seconds. You better develop some interpersonal skills like now, or you're going to be quickly on the outside looking in. As you know, we did attend classes on a once-a-week basis where we learned about Disney's philosophy to business. So 1 week could be hotel restaurant management, theme parks, motion pictures, and so on. But for me, and I think for you as well, the true education was in the theme park. So that van would pick us up from the trailer park, take us to the mouth of a tunnel where there's a tunnel system that spans the entire Magic Kingdom, where you'd walk through the tunnel to the wardrobe department, put your uniform on for the day, go back out to your location, elevator bank to the 2nd floor, doors open, and you were on stage. And you were to act in a fashion consistent with that of a Disney employee. And so the best example I share with others of what that experience was like was the one question I would get 50 plus times a day, and that would be, where can I find Mickey? And I was to greet that question each and every time as if I never heard it before, all too pleased to point the guest in the right direction. And here's the thing, and we both know it, at our core. I could do that right 49 times, but it wouldn't have carried water with that 50th guest. So that summer of 1986 for me is when I learned about this idea of achieving and sustaining the level of excellence, and I think that's the thread that runs through my fabric to this day. It's what helped me launch my post-college career in the investment advisory space and a more entrepreneurial pursuit after that, and certainly represented the foundation for what Authentica is today.
So we'll get into some more of that here toward the end, because I think that I want to pull that thread a little further. But I want to now come back to the storyline where, okay, you're coming out of college, you're getting into the investment advisory space, you're kind of trying to make your way. And like a lot of us, you had so many different life experiences at that point you're drawing from and all that. And all of us know this, you don't ever really discover your purpose. I think you just keep pursuing it, and it changes and ebbs and flows because you really never arrive, right? You're always constantly evolving it.
Work in process.
And sometimes we're on the mountaintop and sometimes we're in the valley. What was the first big valley that really kind of took your breath away, knocked the wind out of you that maybe you weren't expecting?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to cite. So I began my investment advisory career Valentine's Day, 1987. I had moved through a process where there was every reason under the sun for people to not give me that opportunity. Coming out of college, not coming from much in the way of resources, not having much of a network, where Phil Clark, the person that hired me, said, Craig, he said, for every 10 people that come into the space, only 2 of the 10 make it past 3 years. Why should we bank on you being one of those folks? And I simply said, look, Phil, I'm going to be one of the 2, so you're going to either be hiring me or competing against me. And I felt that bold, and I really felt this is what I meant to be doing. So started again Valentine's Day, 1987, months before the crash of 1987, where the market went down significantly within a matter of days. And my observations, Jeff, was as disruptive and as cataclysmic this was for some. The observations I made was I was looking around the office. There were phone calls coming in, but nobody was answering the phones. Nor were the advisors making outbound calls to their clients at a time when the clients needed their advisors the most. And so the simple observation I made was that, look, if I get here sooner or earlier than everybody else and I stay a little bit later, and while we're all here together, I'm doing things that others aren't willing to do, it stood to reason that I could build a practice that maybe could be special over time. So what was significant disruption to some was an epiphany or a trigger for me to have additional insights in terms of what I could be in the advisory space, and hopefully building a practice that could stand the test of time.
So take us a little bit more on that journey then. So you built a successful practice, and I'm sure it was all, roses and unicorns, right? It all went well, and there was never any issues. Nothing happened. It just, today you're better off for it. It's just built upon it. No, what was kind of take us a little bit on the peaks and valleys of that part of your career.
So, what I was very comfortable doing with each checkpoint was taking the mold that got me to that next destination and throwing it against the wall, breaking it to smithereens and retooling, rebuilding to be able to accommodate more in the way of growth, but without compromising the level of care, engagement, and the quality of the relationships with those we served. And this was at a time where the idea of a team in the 1980s and 1990s in the investment advisory space was, I like you, you like me, I bowl on Thursdays, you golf on Fridays, we'll cover each other, and that's the team. And it wasn't that my model was that much more sophisticated, but it did have 4 quadrants, and it was me identifying what I like to do, those things I'm skilled to do, those things I don't like to do that need to be done, and those skills I need that I don't possess. And that was the framework for being able to build out a team over the course of time that ultimately became 10 in number. We did build $1 billion book of business. We were very solid as it relates to what we did within the advisory realm. But my epiphany was, especially the last several years of my career, where we were pretty much a referral-only practice, where we would meet with those prospective clients that were referred to us by our existing clients, where I would meet with them, and really the only question I wanted to be able to ask at the end of an hour was, am I in the presence of someone where I feel like a relationship could start that stands the test of time? And invariably what would happen, Jeff, would be there would be an expectation of talking about all the investment advisory stuff, but I would always start with more learning about the backgrounds and what was important to those people I was talking to. And invariably, not knowing exactly when and what, there would be 2 or 3 or 4 opportunities within that hour where there's an opportunity to be able to ask a question that would be beyond where most would look to tread. They would more be concerned about being liked in a meeting, whereas I was very comfortable asking questions that could be borderline uncomfortable, but as a fiduciary, I felt it was important for me to ask those questions, perhaps provide a rationale as to why I'm asking it. But what would happen almost in every instance would be the right questions would trigger, those desires, those pursuits, fears, and otherwise. And when people begin to share those elements, de facto it's done. A relationship's being consummated right before your eyes, whether there's a signature on the bottom of a piece of paper or not. So I think what we're able to do in a very crowded marketplace is connect with people in a way that had meaning to inspire their confidence and then simply do what we said we were going to do. And if you do nothing more than that, in most industries, you're a rock star, let alone being able to go above and beyond. So we were fortunate enough to be able to understand the importance of being able to do that, and I think really develop these transcendent relationships with those that we served. So that was what helped us build to this $1 billion practice over an 18-year period of time. And then, as you know, 2005 came about, and that was when my struggle, my significant disruption began.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that, because I think people will probably relate to it a lot in maybe in different ways, but tell that part of the story.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So a team of 10, one of our administrative assistants was bipolar, alcoholic, had issues, and to be very candid, the other team members did not want her to continue on with the team, but I was of the mind that we were the best thing that she had going on, so to correctly label me as an enabler would be accurate. But it did get to a point where we did have issues, response times and such, and that triggered a meeting between our team member that oversaw staff, branch manager, and our assistant. And unfortunately, I think this might have been one of those days where she hadn't taken her medication. She went off the rails and brought awareness to our compliance department, and unbeknownst to me at the time, as far as the New York Stock Exchange, about something that I was supporting. And the compliance department called me on that day and said, Craig, this is our understanding. My brother-in-law was playing in NFL Europe at the time, and I was taking care of his bills in a manner consistent with that of a brother-in-law. And they detailed their understanding of what was going on. And at the end, I said, look, everything that you've just shared is exactly what I'm doing on behalf of Dave. They said, well, we got to suspend you. And I said, suspend me for what? They said, Craig, do you have a power of attorney in place for Dave? And, it was one of those things where I would best equate it to the cobbler's son having holes in his shoes. We're doing so much for so many, and that was something that we didn't have in place. And through the combination of these lightning bolts from the blue with an issue like this going beyond the firm, these transgressions led to November 11th of 2005, me being fired, and candidly losing everything financial. Everything that I had was part of my business. I was so passionate and so caring and so committed that all I saw was the building out of this amazing book of business and continuing to be all those things that we were to our clients. And so deferred comp, stock, the value of the practice, all these different elements, it was seemingly up in smoke overnight, and then it got worse, where a few weeks later, I'd gotten a letter from the New York Stock Exchange where they wanted to conduct an inquiry into to what was going on. So at the time, my kids were 5 and 3. Our family was devastated. It was great. It was a great diet. I probably lost about 10, 12 pounds within a week. But I would best describe where I was at this point in time, Jeff, as being akin to a blind man in a dark room where they rearranged the furniture. I was so certain and so aligned with what I was so passionate about, and then it met with a very, very hard stop.
So in this time period, describe a little bit of the emotion feel, because I think if people, they may not fully appreciate, this wasn't like you just got fired from your job. There's now, and it wasn't anything that you had knowingly done illegally or erroneously, like you were just trying to serve your brother-in-law, and then different things happened, and there's different compliance issues we don't need to bore the audience with for this episode. But the reality is that it was for a moment there had to be moments where there was some seriousness to the allegations that could have caused you more harm than just a financial ruin. And what was the emotion that you were experiencing through that time? And take us into some of those dark places for a second, and how you were processing all that.
Well, it was incredibly dark. I asked permission from my firm for me to reach out to our clients, for me to individually call all of them, which probably took the better part of a week or two, to explain, what had happened and the fact that I was going into an unknown period. And yet, one of my memories was simply being in my office, and obviously, my wife walking back and forth, probably hearing the same conversation with a different person over and over and over. And just the impact that had. And it was beyond whatever I could have described. I will tell you this, Jeff, the very following day, because what most people, I think, do when they go through a time of significant trial is they probably knowingly or not model their behavior after others that have gone through something comparable. And so I tried to feel bitterness, animosity, resentment, and anger for about 5 hot minutes, and I will tell you, it's just not in me. It was hard work to feel shitty. In my heart of hearts, I knew the best of my life hadn't been lived. I had no idea what I was going through and where it was leading, but I was open to the idea that the best of my life still hadn't been lived. And even though I didn't know what was going to come next, didn't mean it couldn't be better, greater, more glorious than anything I've done before. I did do a mental check, though, and I don't know if I've really shared this with anybody before, but I did some calculations in my mind because I knew the significance of the loss financially. And I knew I was still in a period where, it was still going to be unknown. But I said to myself, how long is it going to take me to recover from something like this? And I started with 5 years, and I think I laughed to myself. I said 10, and I thought, no way. 15, maybe. Where I arrived at in my head was 20. And this November, it'll be 19 years.
Well, you're ahead of schedule.
Well, no, but you know what? I don't know. I ask myself from time to time, is it really ever over? And, I don't know. But I mean, the things that I learned in the first few days or weeks after this were life-saving. I could have leapt ahead to what others were maybe thinking. I mean, look, I was on 5 nonprofit boards. I went to each of the different nonprofit boards. I gave them the opportunity to distance themselves from me. None of them took me up on my offer, and I was grateful for that. But I knew that this specter of the unknown, where there'd be a presumption or a default to this being really bad, what did Craig do? Jeff, I wanted to get to the mountaintop. It shouted at the top of my lungs what this was. But going through a period of time like this, anything you say is going to appear to be self-serving or biased. So I said very little. But yet I knew if I went into hiding, that it would be assumed that I did something really wrong. So I kept visible no matter how hard it was.
Right.
And there was only one thing that I would never, ever, ever allow anybody the opportunity to do. And that was the idea of giving anybody the opportunity to feel this much sorry for me. That was not going to happen, because I knew if I allowed that, then the relationships that I had established over this extended period of time, the value, the trust, the connection, the alignment, if I allowed that, then I'd always be wondering, are you with me because of the feeling of connection, alignment, and care, or are you with me because you now feel sorry for me? And I was never going to go down that path. So if there's one thing I was very, very grateful for, was learning the importance of that very early on, and then not wavering thereafter.
So in the moment, the days, the weeks that followed that, I mean, obviously we teach the neuroscience of this. We know that, biologically self-preservation, activation is real all the time. But then when you have a traumatic event like that, where, I mean, you're looking over here, you've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, a wife, and they have a different level of self-preservation. When they see their husband and their father go through something, there's a piece of that that's probably, hey, I hope Dad's okay, or I hope Craig's okay. But then there's also, well, holy crap, what does this mean for us? How did you balance the care of the family and the helping them see your character shine through this, but at the same time, making them feel like it's going to be okay? Because that's a hard balance, right? As a leader of a family to do.
That's it. I mean, I didn't know it was going to be okay. I mean, one story, though, going back, this is a few days after, I was tying my daughter Ava's shoes, and she rubbed my head. She said, "Daddy, you have no hair and you have no job." And I laughed. I'm not confident my wife found it to be all that funny, especially just given what we were going through. But the reality is, to Ava and my son Carson, I was still their father. What was going on professionally was something that I was not going to let deter or impact or influence their well-being. I can again look back and feel like I did a very, very good job with that. It was hard. It was probably then when I learned about this idea of being very present in the moment ongoing, and something counterintuitive the most, where I became unbelievably detached to specific outcomes. Because when I looked at the totality of what was on my plate, our plate, it would be overwhelming at best, and my mind would be a mess, and I wouldn't be able to execute on anything. But what I do feel like I was able to do is get really, really good at being present and being able to just focus on what's next. So as it relates to the kids, I feel like I did a good job. Candidly, with my wife and I mean, we were not that great for each other during this period, in that, I didn't feel like I had time to grieve, right? I looked at the totality of the responsibilities, and me not wanting that whatever my kids would have known of me would have been reputationally what I was prior to their ages of 5 and 3. So I knew I was going to have to get super intentional real fast. But the reality is I probably, I wasn't as good as I could have been or should have been for Anna. And And I don't feel that she was probably, great for me during that period of time. So it's one of those things, if I'm being just really honest, somehow, some way, we were able to work through the morass to continue on, but where we did just enough, I think, to be able to stay contained, stay connected, and be able to move through this and be able to simply get on to what was next. And for that, I'm grateful. I learned a lot from the experience, and I feel so much of what I share now through Authentica today is really a representation and a reflection of all those learnings for that many-year period of time.
Yeah, so that's let's make that pivot then, because I think as we get to 2014 and the birth of Authentica, one of the things that struck me about you, it still strikes me about you, knowing you now for several years, is, and I've heard this from others as well, like, what is with this guy? Like this can't be real. And what I mean by that for the audience is that you have this, you have such a commitment to others, to serving others, to thinking about other people's perspective and creating environments where they can learn something that's going to help benefit them, and many times to your own detriment. And it's almost like it's not believable. And I've been your friend long enough to know that it is believable. And so as you made this transition, so you were down in the valley, you lost everything, you had to rebuild from scratch. You still got to be a dad and a husband, and yet you still got to find your personal purpose in all this. What was that epiphany for you to go, okay, the path to success here is going to be through the service of others. And then the vehicle that I choose to do this with is going to be unique. How did that all start to come together? And then where were some of the light bulbs that went off for you?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to tie a bow with the whole NYC chapter, because it was a 15-month ordeal where at the end my truth was confirmed. My transgressions were worthy of that of a 3-month suspension, which is a love tap. Within that setting where 95% of the people that go through the enforcement process with the NYSC are barred for life. So here I had a punctuation mark, but the thing, Jeff, was I witnessed the worst in everybody going through this. I was very alone, in isolation. It was a struggle, and I made the conscious decision simply that I wasn't going to go back to what I was doing, because it would suggest to the universe that this was all that I was capable of. So I just felt that wasn't going to be where I went. And so what I did is I established 4 criteria. Number 1, obviously leveraging past skills, relationships, and experiences, doing so in a more lifestyle-friendly manner, doing it with people that I knew and trusted, and where I could begin to recover. Those were, the 4 things that I was focused on, and that led me to reconnect with probably my best friend from college, Greg Milet, who had just started a company by the name of Corp United, and over, a 10, 12-year period of time, we were able to help build, and Greg sold that business, and I'll be forever indebted to Greg for giving me that opportunity to become somewhat relevant in an altogether different space. So approaching age 50, looking back, again, obviously a lot of different relationships, experiences, venues of prominence that I've had the good fortune of being at. The thought was I could smash those 3 things up together to create these hard to replicate experiences that showcase the theme of excellence as a means of differentiation, but with a twist. And the twist was, we do not provide, as you know, an agenda before or even at the event to our attendees to keep them present and in the moment, nor do we provide any stated deliverables, not wanting to limit their experience. And, I was wondering, why am I so bent on doing this? Because if anything, early on, it would be best described as a sales prevention tool, right? Because people want to know. And I was reluctant to share. I didn't share. And I just felt this was going to give me the opportunity to really identify who are those people that I'm meant to serve and support, because I myself went through that process of not knowing for an extended period of time. But in a bigger picture sense, years later, we had this thing called the pandemic that hit. right? Where the playbook was the playbook until it no longer was. And then it dawned upon me conveniently and maybe retrospectively, but I think what I want to be able to do, Jeff, is get people to a place where they can simply trust that they can be what this moment in time requires. They could harness the totality of their life experiences and bring forth exactly what's needed right now. And so the overarching view is the skills that take a leader to the top aren't the skills that'll help them be successful once they get there. And it's almost as if with many organizations, it's not where until you get to that place of prominence that you're given the gift of understanding the importance of emotional intelligence. And I just felt that I could introduce that earlier in a myriad of different ways through the event frameworks that we create, where it would leverage the spectrum of all that I've gone through. So I do it because I feel that there's no way on the planet that I would be doing the work that I'm doing today unless I went through everything that I went through. And so I feel in some respects the work that I'm doing now is honoring the immense struggle. It's honoring the disruption. It's honoring my family. It's honoring anybody that supported me in the least to be able to get to this point where we're having this conversation.
So what I get excited about for you now is, so you created these events. By the way, for the audience, I've been to several of Craig's events, and it's completely annoying for someone like me as a control freak to not have an agenda and not know what's going to happen. And I've been to them now, and I know kind of what to expect, and I still get moved by the experiences that happen at these events. And so we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but what's this look like now for you in your next chapter? Like, I know you're really committed and passionate as things have gotten more formed, as it were, with Authentica. And now that you're building it for scale and for mass exposure to more people, but the right people. What's the next chapter look like for you personally and with Authentica?
Yeah, well, what's interesting, Jeff, is at the beginning, it was nothing more than, again, being almost like a Wonka, where I'm inviting you into the chocolate factory to see what was inside. There's no plan. There was nothing more than just seeing if this is something that could be done, number one, and how people would take it in. But for a 4-year period of time, I was getting up at 3:30 in the morning and doing it from 4 to 8 prior to going to work each and every day, with the time that overlapped with my work at Corp United, and on Sundays. And I was just trying to really answer one question. And that was, is this even a business, right? It was a novelty for sure. And to work with the likes of Ken Blanchard, yourself, and Debbie Phelps and Commander Mark McGinnis, all these unbelievable people that are extraordinary at what they do, was a pleasure. But I really didn't know how this could be something that was sustainable and more beyond a hobby, if you will. But then, a few years in, people were coming out of the events wanting more for themselves, more for their organizations, and that led me down this nomadic trail of just simply looking for the best and brightest with 4 criteria in mind. Number 1, technical expertise being table stakes. Number 2, as hokey as it may sound, a bedside manner. Number 3, a commitment to a transcendent experience for those you serve. And number 4, where the offering represented innovation in some way. And so that obviously led to me meeting you and the great work that Brain Trust does within the communication effectiveness space, helping organizations in a myriad of different ways where it produces profound impact both personally and professionally, and other offerings. And so today, here we're at 10 years in, where we are in the experiential learning space, but we've created this global platform for human potential activation, where we've been able to engage with organizations that understand to what extent you can convey to your employees, we care about your total well-being. You can correctly see that as a retention tool. You can see that as a means to attract talent. And for any organization that understands the cost of a departing employee, they understand that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, me being walled in, sort of a walkabout in the woods for 10 years, and making the conscious decision of not just hanging up my shingle and competing against everybody else like everybody else, but building a brand and a platform that has a chance to go on in perpetuity and stand the test of time, that's gotten me to here. But make no mistakes about it, it was just being cognizant of what's the next thing to do and trusting at a level that goes beyond what most know. I mean, it's easy to trust during good times, but I'll learn everything and more about somebody witnessing how they go through their struggle and what's their ability to trust when there's maybe every reason in the world not to do it. And again, I'm not your guy for about 4,000 things, and I can assure you that's the case. But there's 4 or 5 things, including that, where I've been able to, I think, do it at a reasonably high level.
You know, what I've really enjoyed about your events is that not just that the quality of humans, I mean, these are high-level leaders that I've had a chance to spend time with, sometimes even weekends with, and it really levels the playing field of humanity and shows us that no matter where we are or what we've accomplished or who we think we might be, at the end of the day, we all share the same fears and struggles, and our stories matter. And when you start to share those stories with one another, you can help each other. I think that's the magic in my experience with your events. It's not even the lack of agenda. It's the feeling that you're locking arms with folks, that you're not alone, and that you can share your own life's experiences with people in a way where you want to share with them, because you can see you've assembled a group of people at these events that genuinely are there to care for others and self-discover things that can make them better, to go out and care more when they leave your events. So,
well, I think, look, the one thing I just want to say, just to wrap this up, is so look, there's no blue ribbon at the end. There's a zillion people on this planet. We'll all go through something. It's not what happens, it's how we respond to what happens that ultimately tells the tale. And I think through the events where we're able to highlight those elements that roll up to the broader emotional intelligence theme, again, the candor, the transparency, vulnerabilities of strength, empathy, inclusion, and so on. If I spot vulnerability in me being less, I'm giving you permission to be able to do the same. And I think people think more highly of those people that are willing to share, who they are as humans, instead of trying to be something that's above and beyond.
Yeah, and I think the magic in where you do these and hold these events is that you don't see that happen too often in the cubicles and the boardrooms, in the hallways of institutions in corporate America. You kind of need to get into an environment that's more conducive, which is, I think, another piece of the magic. So, all right, last question. So let's say, 30 plus years, we'll just randomly pick 30 plus years from now, and let's say that that you go to the big event in the sky before I do, and I get a chance to eulogize you. What would you hope that I would say Craig Lucas's legacy was?
Boy, that's a big question. That he didn't give up. He continued on with the well-being of others first and foremost in mind.
Well, that's simple, but I like to talk, so I'm going to have to give more information than that. I hope you're okay with that.
Sure. I mean, I want something that can fit on a tombstone.
That's it. You did. You accomplished it. Well, Craig, I think, knowing your life story, obviously, before we came to this, I think now others have a great appreciation for your life story and how your peaks and valleys of your life have been kind of culminated in this passion and purpose that you're on today. And I want to thank you for the impact you've had on me personally, for the company, for Brain Trust, the impact you've had on the people inside of our company, and for the friends that I've gotten to meet simply because of knowing you. So a lot of the quality relationships I have currently in my life today are a direct result of you connecting me with people that you knew were like-minded and sharing that. And that's just who you are. So, the show is called the Driving Change Podcast. And thank you for being who you are and driving the change in the world that you're doing and not seeking the credit for it, which is refreshing in today's day and age. So I want to give you some of that credit on this show. So thank you for doing that and who you are and the impact you're making.
Jeff, I can't even begin to describe for you what my relationship with you and Brain Trust means to me. Your commitment to what we're doing, your support, your care in desiring to deliver big impact to anybody personally and professionally. I'm inspired by you. I'm inspired by Dan. I'm inspired by your entire team, and I consider myself very fortunate to be in your company. So thank you.
Well, likewise. So for listeners out there, I want you to go check out Authentica.com. It's Authenica, Authentica.com. You can learn all about Craig's events, the organization itself, and what's coming up and what's coming down. Anything really exciting you want to say is on the horizon here in the next 6 months that you're excited about?
Yeah, well, I mean, next week I'll be with Brad Dickerson, the former CFO and Chief Operating Officer of Under Armour, former CEO of Blue Apron, and former president of Bombas, where Brad has a few properties there in the Shenandoah Valley. So we'll be having an executive retreat event there, Shenandoah 3, next week. And there's a number of announcements that we're going to be making as it relates to new program offerings and in our event calendar for 2025. And in addition to Stage Pass, which is our digital on-demand program offering that features special guests like yourself, great stories, important topics, and a pledge to an unscripted, unrehearsed conversation between myself and my guests to be able to generate the most authentic degree of engagement we're capable of delivering. We just filmed episodes with Swen Nader, the former backup Senator Bill Walton at UCLA, and the former player that had the best relationship with legendary college basketball coach John Wooden, where with the blessing of the Wooden family, we'll be releasing Nader on Wooden here in a month or two, digital on-demand form. So I'm super excited about that and the impact that will deliver.
That's going to be awesome. And people can learn about that through Authentica, through the website, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. Well, everyone go check all those things out and get it plugged into Authentica for, if not the rest of this year, then in 2025 for sure, and get to some events. And Craig, thank you again for being a guest.
My pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.